Hello, finance students. So last time we had been looking at preferences, right? That the as a consumer, I might prefer pizza over omelets, and I might prefer $5 over omelets. We pretty much were just picking on omelets, but that in general, people have preferences for some things over other things, and right, we have things we like and things we don't like, and that the things that if we have the things that we like worth more points, and if we set up a point system, we can have the things we like worth more points, and then those points will help us naturally figure out what people would do in a certain circumstance, right? If they have an opportunity to get something that has more points to them, that's the same thing as them naturally just, it tells us that they would prefer, pizza to an omelet. And so we have these points that we're working with. In general, it is also true that the more of something people get, the less they tend to value it, and also, therefore, the less points it's worth, right? Because if the second slice of pizza is not as good as the first egg roll, I might buy one slice of pizza but not two. And this is a pattern that's approximately true for most goods and services. So you get this curve that I have displayed here, where the amount of the value of a good or service, the more you have of it, decreases. And so we're going to get to eventually applying this kind of thinking, this diminishing marginal utility thinking, to money. But right now we're still on pizza. So this is down here, the x-axis on our graph here is slices of pizza. All right, so yeah, pizza, P-I-Z-Z-A here, pizza, or do P-Z-A, pizza. And then the y-axis is this utility points. Utility points, okay. There we go. So, and we have this question that I posed last time. So if I spend $5 on a slice of pizza, I get 7 utility points for it. I like pizza. But now imagine I'm at the restaurant, and the proprietor, after handing me the slice, says, "Hey, have I got a deal for you? Just wait. What if we flip this coin? You call heads or tails. If you get heads, if you call it right, I will give you a second slice of pizza. If you call it wrong, then you give me that slice back. So I have a 50% chance at 2 slices of pizza, and a 0% chance, and a 50% chance at 0 slices of pizza." And we had pointed out that this is the same amount of pizza, right? On average, you're getting a slice of pizza. Right? 50% of the time you get 2, 50% of the time you get 0. So on average, that's a slice of pizza. If I did this 100 times, I would end up with 100 slices of pizza, right? So the amount of pizza isn't decreasing. But if you really asked yourself, would you do this, right? If I spent $5 on a slice of pizza, would I really gamble it? And so there's a reason why maybe you wouldn't. So if we think about this, right, in terms of happiness points, if I do the pizza gamble, right, if I do the pizza gamble, one of two things is going to happen. I'm going to either end up here and get 2 slices of pizza, right? If the good thing happens, I get 2 slices of pizza. Or if I get unlucky, I end up down here and get nothing, right? This is the same amount of pizza, right? Mentioned that already. On average, you get a slice. It's the same amount of pizza. It is not the same amount of utility, right? I have a 50% chance of getting 12 utility, and I have a 50% chance of getting 0 utility, which means on average, I get 6 utility. 6 utility. So 1 slice of pizza is 7 utility. 2 slices of pizza, half of the time, right, is 6 utility. We can see this graphically if I draw a line. So I'm just going to connect these two things, right? If I draw a line connecting these two, right, there's a gap here, right? So if I, right, there is a gap But oops. Yeah, don't change the color yet. All right, now right here there's this gap here. I'm going to make it orange. There's a gap. Right, we have a loss. This loss of utility. So what's going on here? So we have, right, so this we have less, right? This is like a drop in utility. I could put this like little bracket here. We have a loss. Well, why? Well, because, right, there's a really important fundamental concept as to what's going on here. What's going on here, right, is sometimes you have a terrible outcome, right? Sometimes you have no pizza. And that's bad, right? You're bummed, right? You spent $5 and now you got nothing. Maybe you don't even get to eat lunch. You're pretty miserable, okay? So obviously, right, if we just reduce the amount of pizza, that's going to make us miserable. But we didn't reduce the amount of pizza, right? We've already established it's the same amount of pizza, right? So if I end up with nothing, right, I end up with nothing. How can I end up with nothing so often and still have the same amount of pizza? Well, right, we know how that can happen. What's happening is that, in effect, we're going to the version of us that has no pizza and steals the pizza from them to give to the other version of us that already has a slice of pizza. Right? Because in the world when I have two, it's kind of like I have the one I bought plus the other one I stole from parallel universe me. Right? Really, you can really kind of think about that. And so, right, so if I'm stealing pizza from poor me to give to rich me, you can see why this doesn't make sense, right? This is sort of like an arrangement of the world that's inferior, right? Where it's like rob from the poor to give to the rich. Right? It doesn't work out. And you can even think about it in terms of backwards. What if the actual restaurant said, "Oh, you don't actually get to buy pizza here. You have to buy pizza coin flips. We only give out 2 slices at a time." Well, it would be really awesome if parallel universe you could take one of their 2 slices they don't really need and hand it through like the fabric of, some alternate dimension and give the slice of pizza to the poor you. Right? Like the world would be better. All of the versions of you would all have 1 piece instead of half of you having, more pizza than you maybe it's not more than you need, but it's, that second slice is not so great. And the first slice is really great to the people that are hungry, right? So that's really the fundamental problem with doing this pizza gamble, is that you're robbing from poor you to give to rich you, and that just is not it's not a good way to run your life. And it's not a good way, and therefore it's not preferred, right? You would not prefer to have that be how it's going, right? If you got to choose between having a slice all the time and having a 50-50 shot at 2 or 0, you would choose the 1, right? And it's worth more points because you would prefer it, right? If you would prefer it, it's worth more points, but it also makes sense that that would be true because you're losing points if you arrange it this way. So this is all kind of contrived, right? Nobody is selling pizza bets. That's just kind of ridiculous. But, right, this is important as a metaphor, right? So this is an example that teaches a true principle to things that do come up in real life, right? So I'll give you a good example. Let's imagine that you wanted to start a hot dog cart. I love this idea, right? I know that there's a really successful one. Like, I don't know. This is just like a little, just almost a dream I have. So just imagine I really want to start a hot dog cart. And want to, have like cool Chicago dogs, do the celery salt, all that. Okay? Well, that is not a sure bet, right? If I pay a bunch of money, I do this hot dog cart, it might work and be awesome, or it might be terrible and cost me a ton of money. Or it might just be like mediocre and not turn out so great. Right? So let's imagine that maybe there's only 2 versions of the world. One where it's like, and one where it's awesome. Right? So fundamentally, doing the hot dog cart, right? I could also choose not to do the hot dog cart and keep the money. right? So fundamentally, launching the hot dog cart is kind of like the pizza gamble, right? And there's nothing we can do. Like the gambly part of launching the hot dog thing is part of the activity, right? It's uncertain how your business is going to do, right? If you knew exactly how your business would do, it would be a lot easier to do it. Okay, right? So really what it means is that economic activity broadly of all types has uncertainty baked into it, right? If you take a job out of, let's imagine you're working a bachelor's degree, you complete your degree, you take your first job. Well, if you take that job, you can't take a different job you're going to take. If you take that job, you might get laid off, you might not, right? You might get promoted, you might not, right? There's tons of economic uncertainty around all the stuff we do. And it makes a ton of sense to, anytime we can, steal from the rich version of us and give to the poor version of us, right? So in the job world, right, when are you poor? You're poor when you're laid off. Okay, so you get no income, except for, right, this isn't how society works. Why? We figured out that it's actually probably smart to take money from all of the, right, like, so if you're employed, your employer pays into an unemployment insurance fund, right? And then if people get laid off, they can collect unemployment, have money in unemployment to help find a new job. Not much, but it's more than nothing, right? In a way, it functions as stealing from employed us to give to unemployed us. And this can make a ton of sense to do, even if we ultimately don't end up being laid off. It's like having fire insurance in your house. Even if your house doesn't burn down, you can still be happy you had fire insurance, because you weren't living day to day wondering if your most valuable asset, backed by or encumbered by a giant mortgage, isn't gonna just go up in smoke and leave you holding a huge debt burden. Right, so the principle of stealing or taking from rich versions of our future to give to poor versions of our future to increase overall utility comes up all over the place. And that also means, right, so fundamentally what we're talking about doing is reducing the uncertainty in the financial outcomes of our life, and that inherently maps to what we're going to define as risk, right? So risk is the uncertainty in financial outcomes that leads to a reduction in utility, right? And the bigger the uncertainty, the bigger the loss. And so we can see this here with so let's imagine, well, let's keep this pizza thing going, and I'm gonna switch over to black here. So let's say that third piece of pizza is worth 15, and then the fourth piece of pizza is worth 16, right? So they're really sort of declining in value here. You really don't get a lot of value out of that fourth one. And let's say I buy 2 slices, right? So if I buy 2 slices, I just get 12, right? So there's my, 2 slices, I get 12. But what if I do a gamble with half of my pizza, right? So I get 1 for sure, but then I could also go, I could get 1 for sure and then go up an additional 2 maybe. Well, that would be the difference between 1 and 3 slices, right? So between 1 and 3 is 15 plus 7, 22, divided by 2 is 11, right? So we only miss out on 1 point, kind of like we did down there, right? So if I take the average of 7 and 15, right? So it's still not good to be gambling, right? It's not good for our utility to be taking these bets on pizza, but it only damages us a little bit. We only lose 1 utility point, just like last time, right? But what if we go all in? What if we go nuts and we do 4 or nothing, right? The 4 or nothing pizza bet looks like this. And you could see, right, there is a much larger decline in value here, right? I go all the way down to here. It's half 16, half nothing. That's actually 8. right? That's a decline of 4, right? So I lose 1 utility for a small risk and 4 utility for a large one. And so we really are very interested in reducing that, that final gamble, right? Even if we don't eliminate the uncertainty, even if we can go from 0-4 to 1-3, we are in much better shape, much happier position. And so this actually maps specifically to things that financial advisors do when they're recommending a risk management strategy for clients, right? There are some things that are small enough that you just self-insure, right? If you have, $100,000 income, you don't really need your phone insurance plan probably, right? But you do want an auto insurance plan. You do want health insurance because those things are bigger negative outcomes when they happen. Right? If you get if you get in an accident and get sued, you could have like hundreds and thousands of dollars of medical liability. I could just destroy, right? If you've been saving carefully, frugally your entire life, that could all be wiped out by getting in a bad auto accident without insurance. And so, right, the bigger the uncertainty, the bigger the utility loss, and in some cases, much bigger. So, what does all this sort of wrap up to mean in practice? Well, it means that humans, right, we have a very rational reason for disliking uncertainty in our financial outcomes, right? It makes sense at a fundamental level that we do not like it, right? And it all is based on the fundamental notion that more of the same thing is better, but diminishingly better, right? If it was true, right, that right, if I was homeless and I don't really care about $20, but once I get to $1 million, that's when $20 gets to be awesome, right? If that were true, if that were a fundamental fact of the universe, then this whole story flips on its head, right? And you want to do all the right? You have 2 slices of pizza, you want to go 4 or nothing because the 4 slices, that's where it really matters a lot, right? And but that's not generally how people behave, right? If you look empirically, it's very, very common, almost universal, that people behave as though there's a diminishing marginal utility of money, although how much it diminishes is different depending on the person. So this curve is flatter for some people than others, and that affects the kind of risk they're willing to take from a financial perspective, right? So you might, if you have a very flat curve, you might be very interested in safe investments, whereas if you have, or risky investments, or if you have a very strong curve, then it makes a lot more sense to do safe investments because the uncertainty is a lot more expensive, so to speak, in at least in terms of utility for you. So, and this is actually something, if you're sitting down with a professional financial advisor that's been well trained, they will go through a process with you to help you understand your personal, what's true about you for your risk preferences so that your financial plans match up with your personal risk preferences. Because, again, if you have, because in real life, these gambles that doesn't keep the pizza the same, right? If I go into the stock market, I actually earn money over time on average. And so it can be, right, you end up with slightly more pizza, so maybe it's worth it to do the 7-15 because it's actually an 8-16 or a 9-17, but it's totally not worth it to do the, to do the bigger one, right? And that can be person dependent. But yeah, so this whole picture, what we tend to do mathematically for this curve is to assume that the risk, that preferences for risk for percentage changes in wealth tend to be pretty constant. That's not quite accurate, but it's close to true, and it makes things a lot simpler to deal with. So, and the idea, right, is if I have $1,000 to my name and I have a situation that makes me potentially lose half of it, I'm not going to like that. And if I have $1 million to my name and I have a situation that might make me lose $500,000, I'm not going to like that either. And I kind of not like it about the same amount. If that's true, then percentage allocations to different financial assets are constant across wealth states. But anyway, so that assumption is called constant relative risk aversion, and so this whole thing can be termed the constant relative risk aversion model. There's another we'll get into in the next video. So if we simplify things to say we dislike uncertainty rather than dislike getting too much of something, right? That simplifies the world quite a bit. It's less accurate now because it's not really true that we dislike uncertainty the same amount at all locations, but and a specific type of uncertainty too. But we do so. But if we assume that the only kind of uncertainty that matters is like the statistical standard deviation, then you can get a different kind. That's a similar picture, but you get an x-axis of what you don't like, that standard deviation, that risk, and then a y-axis of what you do like, which is for financial assets returns. And so that ends up being a more you can do more with it at the expense of being less accurate about how people actually behave. So that's what we'll get into the next one, is working with mean variance preferences. But the constant relative risk aversion preferences are more accurate to how people behave, and it's the constant relative risk aversion preferences that show fundamentally why people dislike risk, don't want it, and in fact are willing to pay to get rid of it.